Welcome to DEI What's Working. I'm your host, Laura Close. As co-founder and chief business development officer at Included, I have the incredible honor of spending my days discussing DEI with top chief diversity officers, CHROs, talent acquisition leaders, advocates, and more. As a 20-year veteran of the DEI space, I've known generations of DEI leaders spanning back to a time before DEI was common in our workplaces. I've worked with my team at Included to create this podcast where we can showcase the leaders we interact with at Included and share tips, personal stories, and expert operational guidance, as well as technology recommendations for DEI advocates. Because Included is focused on enterprise DEI, this podcast has a special focus on HR and talent acquisition. I've curated this selection of guests for you to bring you meaningful content that expands our understanding of DEI for every episode. Throughout this series, DEI What's Working, I'll be interviewing DEI leaders operating in the tech, finance, CPG, and similar spaces who have hands-on experience about what is working to move the needle to create breakthrough outcomes with DEI hiring, retention, and promotion. For a long time, we've known that DEI was vital to creating a more just, healthy, and compassionate society. We live in a powerful time where it is now also understood that DEI has a positive impact on business performance, innovation, and revenue growth. And in today's job market, it is vital for businesses to put in the work to embed DEI at every touch point with the candidate and employee in order to build their winning teams. Here's the interview, originally recorded as a LinkedIn Live event. I hope you enjoy. Welcome to everyone who's joined us today. This is Laura Close, co-founder at Included, and we are so happy to have you here. Today is a really special day. We are kicking off our DEI live stream series for LinkedIn. We are so grateful to LinkedIn for this opportunity, and we are so grateful to every single person who's decided to tune in today and join us. We are joined today by Lionel Lee, Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Recruiting at Google, and he is one of a series of speakers who will be joining us to talk about what's working in enterprise DEI and where we can have opportunities to move the needle and make improvements. Now, as we wait for folks to filter in and to join us, we will be reviewing a little bit about who we have here and what we're going to be talking about today. So I'll start off by introducing myself. My name is Laura Close, and I am co-founder at Included. Included is the DEI People Experiences platform. We're a big data solution for enterprise DEI, and we are able to provide end-to-end DEI insights and actions for HR, DEI, and talent acquisition professionals, all in a delightful, easy-to-use experience, complete with action steps based on your own people data, so that you can move more efficiently and more successfully at changing workforce representation outcomes at every single level of your company. My background is 20 years of experience in what is now called the diversity, equity, and inclusion space. My career originated as a political campaigns and policy expert in racial, gender, and economic justice in the late 90s. And I've spent my career locking in new structural opportunities and institutional access for historically excluded and underrepresented communities. Currently, as co-founder at Included, my team and I are creating the first technology of its kind to use AI to help enterprise to scale the DEI function so companies can delight candidates and employees with an equitable, inclusive journey to hire and promotion. Our guest today is Lionel Lee, Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Recruiting at Google, where he leads a team responsible for attraction, engagement, and stewardship of the historically underrepresented through the hiring process. He's also a DEI advisor for software companies, including Included.ai, Candidate, and a DEI advisor at venture capital firm Voyager Capital. Lionel is a board member for Big Brothers Big Sisters and recently was named in the top 100 global diversity, equity, and inclusion professionals to follow by Canvas. Prior to his role at Google, Lionel served as head of diversity engagement at Zillow, providing leadership, coaching, and strategic direction to Zillow's executive leadership team to implement strategies to attract, retain, and develop talent. Before Zillow, Lionel had a 25-year career in talent acquisition, including leading his own agencies focused on sourcing and placing candidates across the technology industry. As a member of Google's recruiting leadership team, Lionel steers Google's 3,000 plus person recruiting organization towards increasing representation of groups that have historically been excluded from the tech industry around the globe. This includes leading initiatives with diverse industry and university programs, implementing hiring equity strategy across Google's hiring process, and direct engagement in hiring of candidates from underrepresented groups. Helping communities has been the constant throughout Lionel's life. He created and developed community groups that promote health and wellness. He has worked with HIV/AIDS education groups, substance abuse addiction organizations, and health groups supporting youth. Lionel also founded Yi Sport Taekwondo, a school in Seattle that produced 54 US Junior Olympic gold medals. Lionel immigrated to the United States from Korea at age 5. His experiences growing up in South Central Los Angeles and later in the projects of Honolulu, Hawaii, helped nurture his passion for community building. Lionel, welcome to the conversation.
Thank you. Thank you.
Very happy to have you here today.
Happy to be here.
Yes, and we are here to talk about what's working and to really listen and learn from your experience focused on DEI in the enterprise, and with a special emphasis on your leadership perspective over talent acquisition. And we are so pleased to have you here today.
Well, thanks for having me again. Cool.
So the first question that I wanted to pose to you is a little bit more personal.
All right.
Yeah. So DEI work is a choice at the end of the day. Yeah, not everyone with your similar story is doing this work. Yeah, why did you choose DEI work?
I actually think that DEI work chose me. Well, I fell into recruiting way back in 1994. And when I say I fell into recruiting, I mean I literally fell into recruiting. I was working in social services. I was working with HIV/AIDS education. I was working with substance abuse at the time. Unfortunately, people that work in those fields do not make a lot of money. And I had a child to support. So I had to start looking for other things aside from the fact that I was really burning out emotionally. And this guy that I met on a basketball court, to be honest, was recruiting me for a recruiting firm. And I needed another job. So I went and interviewed over in Bellevue. And I sat across the table from like 9 blonde-haired, blue-eyed women. Knew I didn't belong from the very beginning, but accepted it because of the money and did extremely well. Knew that I did not want to be corporate just because my experience was so horrible, right? Just going through that and having those experiences, having those microaggressions on, daily basis and all that. I started my own agencies, did anything I could to stay out of corporate. And then a good friend of mine called me. She was a VP over at Zillow. And she and I had worked together before at Washington Mutual when I was their diverse executive recruiter. And she asked me if I would help her, do this thing called diversity, equity, and inclusion at Zillow. I'll be honest, I didn't even know what that was. I wasn't, that's not something that, that was familiar to me. All I was thinking about was, okay, how do I do my job? How do I support my family and not have to deal with the BS that happens to a lot of people that look like me or have similar experiences to me in the corporate environment. So my business was doing really well, and I declined. I told her that I would put together something for her. Did that. She said, I love it, but we want you to do it. Would you do it part-time? And I said, yes, I would do it part-time. And then all of a sudden, what I found is that the opportunity that I was given, and I do really believe that a lot of this is about opportunities. When we talk about inclusion in general, I think it's about opportunities. The opportunity that I was given was to change the experience of other people that looked like me and had a very similar background to me. And that's why I chose to do it. I took a huge pay cut to do it because I thought that it was something I really wanted to do. It was like this big challenge, right? Like, how do I affect this in a positive way? How can I change the experience of other folks? And that's why I do it. And luckily for me, I think when your passion aligns with your career, you can do some pretty amazing things. And I've been very fortunate to work with some extraordinary people that were also as passionate. And that's why I'm in it now. I mean, it's still the same focus, change things for the better.
And obviously, you've made the choice to stay corporate. You went corporate and you stayed corporate.
I went really corporate.
You went really corporate.
Yeah.
Tell me about the passion. What I'm trying to say is, I was once told by a liberation leader that every anti-racist is motivated, when you choose the work, when you stay in the work, you're motivated on some level by a broken heart. And I don't know if that resonates with you, but tell me about why you're choosing this work, because you don't have to at this point in your career. You could go horizontal inside Google. You could have gone horizontal inside Zillow. Why?
Yeah. God, that's a really good quote. Like, some broken heart. I think my broken heart is my experience as a Black person in the United States in general.
Yeah.
Right. I remember one time when during one of the killing sprees for Black folks, and I was sitting at my desk at a recruiting firm that I was working at, and my children at that time were both activists. My two older ones were both activists, and we had Eric Garner and we had some other folks being shot. And I remember just thinking about my children because they were like in their early 20s at the time. And I was sitting at the desk and thinking about all the deaths of Black people. And I just broke down. I just broke down crying. Typical for me was that my desk was put off in the corner, right? Because I was in an open work environment. And I don't necessarily like those environments, and it was, I'm the only Black person in the entire company, right? And, no one else has life experiences like mine. I don't relate to anyone, although I really liked the owner and a couple of the folks that I worked with, but still, it was still, work for me. It wasn't like, I wasn't doing anything that was a passion for me. And I just broke down crying, and, but in private. And then one of my new supervisor, she walks over and she says, she was going to ask me something. She says, "Hey, are you okay?" And I said, "No, yeah, I'm fine." And she goes, "Well, what's wrong?" And I said, "Oh, I mentioned something about the killings." And she said to me, she said, "Oh, I'm so sorry. Did you know them?" And I was like, in my head, I'm like, "Are you out your, like, what am I doing? Like, why am I here? It doesn't make any sense to me." And it was at that point that I kind of made a decision that I'm going to leave. I was going to go do something else. I didn't know what I was going to do, but I just didn't want to be there no more,
Yeah.
And that's what kind of led to, I don't think I would have ever left that company. I loved that company.
Yeah.
I loved working there. There was BS like there is everywhere else. But the owner was cool, and the other folks that I worked with were cool. And then this one person comes in and she says something like that, and it just struck me, right? Like, maybe I need to go. And that's when opportunities opened up. And I went and became a director of talent acquisition for a small startup. And then that didn't work out, or the company, failed. And
Yeah.
I started my own company, and then Zillow came.
Yeah.
But I do believe that I think that it was accumulation of all of these things that I experienced in my life that kind of led me to this point. But if I can pinpoint one particular thing that really drove me to this, or at least opened me up
Yeah.
for it, it was that.
I'm going to ask you one more personal question, and then we'll get into some of the enterprise conversation. I've shared with you that I also grew up in blue collar and raised poor communities in Southern California outside of LA. And personally, I've struggled throughout my life to sort of bridge the feelings about the folks that, frankly, it feels like they got left behind, right? Like my life went on, and the kids I grew up with, it didn't happen for them. And I know a lot of people listening to this conversation have their version of that story. We've got a lot of folks listening today who are immigrants. We've got a lot of folks listening today who grew up similarly, right, in blue collar, raised poor communities and are the one who made it.
Uh-huh.
I'm assuming you have some kind of emotional relationship to that concept. And it's something that I don't know if I'll ever find an answer to, but does that resonate for you? And if so, how do you make sense of it?
Yeah, yeah, I'm the one. I'm the one. Except actually, that's not true. My brother and I are the ones, and my brother is back in Hawaii. He's not my blood brother, but he's definitely my brother. We've known each other since we were 13, and he, very typical Hawaii boy, just kind-hearted and hard worker, and started his own company. So he's doing extremely well. Um, and then for me to be in like this corporate environment, like all my friends go into shock. Like whenever, I went back home before I joined Google, or officially joined Google, and we had a big golf tournament, and all my friends, like from high school, many of them were there, and they kept asking me like, "What do you do?"
Right.
And I was like, "Yeah," I tried to explain it, and then one of my good friends' wives actually knew of me, and she's the principal at Castle High School. And she asked him, "Hey, do you think that Lionel would come to my high school and speak?" So he came to ask me, he goes, like in very strong pidgin,
Yeah.
"Hey, my wife wants to come over and speak at our high school." Bro, what the F do you do? And I told him, and yeah, I mean, it's still, I don't, so I'm kind of torn, because there's a part of me that feels like I belong here. Then there's a part of me that's always in shock that I'm here.
Yeah. Oh.
You know what I mean? Like, I know people that are way, way more intelligent than I am. I know people that are super passionate
Yeah.
about this kind of stuff, but never got the opportunity. And that's why I said that at the very beginning. It's really about the opportunity, because I was given an opportunity. I guarantee you that somewhere at a Chipotle or somewhere else, there's
Yep.
a genius working behind that counter,
That's right.
right? And it's about that opportunity. The way I make this okay for me,
Yeah.
um,
Oof.
I keep working extremely hard to give more opportunities. That's my
Yeah.
that's my driver. That's my driver, is to give more opportunities.
Thank you. That was good. All right, let's get into some of the corporate, the enterprise. Um, so, you know, you're director of DEI recruiting at Google. Uh,
Yep.
what is DEI recruiting? How is it the same or different from non-DEI recruiting?
It is different right now. It is different. My hope is one day that it will be the same, but it's different right now because what we do is we have an extremely intense focus on making sure that there's representation within our company. We set aspirational goals just like everyone else does, and we try to charge towards those goals. It is different because it's extremely nuanced. How do you attract folks? How do you bring those folks in? How do you encourage recruiters to actually make this a part of their day to day? I'm lucky to work in an organization where that is something that is a part of everyone's performance reviews. That is something that everyone is reminded of on a daily basis. The other members of the recruiting leadership team that I have the honor of serving with, the pleasure of serving with, they're all extremely focused in that area as well. We just had a meeting today, and someone who did not have to speak up about equity and process, just did out of nowhere.
Right.
Not really out of nowhere. He does it pretty consistently. But yes, DEI recruiting is very different than regular recruiting.
So how did we get here, Lionel? That DEI recruiting has a name, has a function, has a budget, has a director. How did we get here? What caused this?
Oh man. Okay, so I think we have to separate it out into maybe decades or something, right?
Yeah.
So in the 1990s, there were some compliance rules that were set out, and I actually benefited from those compliance rules. The way that I fell into recruiting was because Microsoft had very strict compliance rules on vendors that they worked with, that they had representation, or what they call back, I don't think they called it diversity. But anyway, they had very strict rules around that. And this company that had moved to Seattle just did not have any. I told you they were all blonde hair, blue eyed, and they hired me because of that. So that's 90s. 2000s, I don't think you saw this as much. In fact, I know you didn't. All of a sudden, it kind of died out because now was the .com era, right? And everybody's just pumping and trying to make money. And that was the big driver was money, 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 money.
That's right.
There were a few companies though, like 2010s, 2012s, that were starting to talk about, okay, well, this feels kind of weird. There's not a whole lot of people, there's not a whole lot of diversity or representation within these companies. And then I forget, was it McKesson that put out the report about, if you have a more representative workforce, then you will have more diverse range of ideas and solutions. And from that, you can create products that are going to be, more widely accepted. So that became huge, right? And then all these companies jumped in on that. I'm benefited from that too. And then to be frank, the most recent was the fact that, people got to watch a Black man get killed on TV.
Say it.
For 8 minutes and 46 seconds or whatever it was, people got to watch a Black man get killed on TV. And then all of a sudden people had this awakening, ooh, injustice does exist. Yes, it exists. And the companies jumped on that too, oh, wait a minute, we really got to do something. And I'm twisted by that, right? Why does it take that type of drama and that type of tragedy to get people to wake up when Black folks and brown folks and women and gay folks and people with disabilities and veterans and everybody else has been saying these things exist, right? And nobody's listening. But I think that was a big part of it. I think it also opened it up for people like me. I'm not the most corporate person, I know, right? But I think it opened up for people like me because then, all of a sudden our voices, mattered more. They wanted to know the experience, they wanted to know. And I do believe honestly that there's two different folks or two different types of folks that go into DEI. Yeah. And I'm not downing either one. I think one is just purely career based. Hey, do you, you climbing that ladder, do you? That's your thing. But from my experience, the people that are most effective are the folks that are social justice.
Yeah, Lionel.
And founded.
Have you been getting these requests? I've started getting them in the last 18 months. People are messaging me and saying, hey, I'm studying how to build my career path in DEI. I'd like to interview you about how you got there. And I was like, I don't think you want my case study, but we could.
Yeah. You get those.
Yeah.
Happy to do it. I mean, you know what? I don't have anything against those folks that this is
it's an
their career choice. Yeah, I'm just saying that from my experience, the people that are most effective at this are people that were affected negatively by the lack of it.
That broken heart.
Those are the folks. Those are the folks that really do this, because it's not something that we just put away, right? I mean, it's something that we live with every day.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think the reason that those requests are so remarkable is what they represent in the evolution, right,
Right.
of the private sector. I mean, like the pathway that they would get from me and have gotten during those interviews involves, multiple arrests, national
Yeah.
political strategy. I mean, and I was like, well, I don't think you want this, but it's here for you, which leads me to the next question. And I, by the way, I consider it to be a sign of hope that this is now a pathway, a career. Um, it looks to me like diversity recruiting, DEI recruiting, various names, has hit hyper speed compared to where it's been in the last 24 months. Have you
Mm.
have you seen uptick in in your professional communities at work, sort of from hiring managers or business unit leaders, either inside or outside, your own enterprise, kind of a louder conversation, higher uptake?
I think I would agree with you. I think this conversation's been going on for a while, and I remember when I first started and started to really learn about what this was, and find out what my drivers were. People would oftentimes talk with me about this, and yeah, like my thing was you had to do it from the right place. And I think people are like, I think you're right. Like within the last, because people used to always bring up the business case for it, right? Like they would
Right.
regurgitate that thing. But now it's like, Black Lives Matter, and, we got to do the right thing, and we need to really think about who we are as a society. And yeah, I think that influenced it quite a bit. So yeah, I would agree, within the last maybe a little bit longer than 24 months, but yeah, there's been a huge uptick, and I'm glad to have it. Honestly, it's like,
So
let's go.
glad, so glad to
Yeah,
have it.
let's go. Whatever it
There's
takes.
yeah, there's so many conversations happening now that personally I don't think we could have dreamed of 20 years ago. Uh,
Right.
when it comes to diversity recruiting, I think the increase in adoption, right? I mean,
Hmm.
we at Included, we've found an insanely high level of understanding across every customer and every potential customer about the business case for diversity. So we're sort of like,
Hmm.
we're good to go there. And that leads us to the need for data and how Included even
Hmm.
comes to be valuable on the market and has a real, strong following as a result of the desire for data-driven action steps and, programs. And my question for you is, as the director of DEI recruiting at Google, what data is most valuable to you? What's your favorite data?
Pass, without a doubt.
Say again?
Pass through.
Pass.
Yeah, what that basically means is that you take a very intense study into what happens to the candidate. Because a lot of companies do really well at, getting candidates at the beginning of the process, right? Top of funnel. They don't do very well at the end of funnel. So I think what's most interesting to me is to find out what happens to them during when they're going through the process. Where do they fall off? Is it at phone screen? Is it at on-site? Is it at, whatever else? And then figuring out like, okay, what happened there, right? So you're able to pinpoint, okay, this is where we're finding the biggest fall off, and you want to find out what happened, because that's where you have to get down to, is the root of it. So for me, without a doubt,
Yeah,
the most interesting data point for me is pass through.
I love that. So I love that for a couple reasons. One, DEI is fundamentally disrupting HR. That's a much longer and sort of dovetailed conversation to what we're having today. But it comes back to this concept of, segmentation of the candidate and employee population, obsession with candidates and employees, the way that we've had customer obsession, the way that we've had customer segmentation, where we knew everything
Hmm.
about the consumer, so we could
Hmm.
really meet them where they're at and we could drive revenue, right? And same thing now, when we look at one of the many ways that DEI is improving and disrupting HR, it's through this obsession with the individualized candidate and employee
Right.
journey, and by demographic, and knowing
Right.
exactly what that Black veterans experience was inside the hiring funnel,
Right.
exactly where they're disproportionately washed out. And of course, I'd be remiss in if I didn't say that it's a mainstay of the included platform, is easy, instant, AI driven, highlighting of exactly what those demographics are experiencing inside the funnel, very visual. And so with included, we are talking to talent acquisition and DEI leaders nonstop about the level of data visibility they do or they don't have, in order to really leverage, intelligent strategy, deliver diversity recruiting results. And what we've really seen time and again is that talent acquisition has such widely varied data cleanliness from one company to the next.
Hmm.
My question for you is like, how did we get here with so much of diversity recruiting still being done manually on Word docs and spreadsheets and TA data systems in, various states of disarray? Like, how is it that it's 2022 and this is what we have?
I think for hmm, I think I think that comes down to like prioritization for the effort, right? Sad to say, but for many companies, especially like I'm not going to point out, but diversity is like a nice to have. It's not it's not necessarily a business need. You have to get to the place where representation, diversity, inclusion, sense of belonging becomes a serious business need for the company. Once you do that, then it's prioritized, then it's properly resourced. But unfortunately, not everyone's there. That's not a thing for a lot of companies. It's like HR add-on for a lot of folks, and that's where the failure starts, right? Then they hire some poor person to go in there and try to turn things around without actually taking a look at the serious issues around it. And sometimes, I mean, I would also say that sometimes diversity officers are ill-equipped to be able to have those kind of conversations with leadership. And I would also say that leadership is always the driver. It's always the driver. The work that I did at Zillow was focused almost primarily on the executive team because that's who I needed to be on board. That's why I needed to internalize the need for inclusion and belonging. If I could do that, then it would trickle down and affect all the other parts of our business, and it
Let me
did.
ask you a question. Let me ask you a question about this. So, because of my background in the space, look, we could say that, and I mean, everything you said, of course, is gospel truth here, and the company does have to prioritize DEI in order to see real results, and has to buy in at the executive level. But we could say we're going to do this as a moral imperative, that it's the right thing to do. And I
Uh-huh.
really, because of my background, I really don't trust. I do not trust DEI buy-in on a purely moral framework because of the lack of incentivization, right? The lack of proof points. Like, it feels thin. It feels like it's going to fall apart. It feels like a house of cards, right? And
Okay.
so I would just say to you, I would ask you, you know, so our hypothesis that included is that, leaders need the data
Agreed.
in order to make a strong choice to fund, to staff, right, and to align OKRs correctly. And I'm
Agreed.
just wondering, does this sound right to you, right? That because I think for folks who are newer to the space, there's a kind of overly idealistic hope that the morality of the conversation will do most of the heavy lifting.
Well, see, this is why I wanted to be on camera because then you could have saw me laughing about this too. It's like, so okay, so I'll challenge you with this then, right? So I agree and I disagree. I do think that it has to be a moral imperative. I do believe that it has to be a social imperative, because I don't think that the problem it's not a Google problem, it's not an Amazon problem, it's not a Microsoft problem, it's a societal problem. What I would say is this then. What if one day somebody comes out with the same study similar to the McKesson that says, hey, you know what? You know, all those things that we said before about diversifying your team is going to create a better product. We found the data says that that's not necessarily true. If you don't have a leader that has internalized the need for diversity, inclusion, belonging from a very different perspective than just the business case, what happens then? They go, you know what? We don't need this anymore. They said because whatever, people are still going to buy our product. Let's just get rid of it because it costs a little bit. Let's just knock that down. That could happen. That could definitely happen. You know as well as I do that data can be churned and turned and pushed and prodded, and things can be said that aren't necessarily there. While I agree that data is so incredibly important in this work, and we are extremely data driven at Google, right? We look at everything. Like it's crazy, all the stuff that we look at. Like I have so many tabs open, and all I do is look at data and try to interpret that data. And I have like a team of people that help me, interpret that data. But I would also say that for me anyway, if my leadership did not internalize the need for representation, did not internalize the need for diversity, did not internalize the need for equity, then I probably wouldn't be here. This probably wouldn't exist in its current form, right? So while I agree, I disagree.
I want to call out two really, really important things. That was very powerful. One is the beauty of your perspective, right? Like that was not a perspective that I had going into that question, right? And this is sort of when we get down to the philosophy of DEI, this is why we need people with different life experiences really having amazing conversations together in every part of the business. So thank you. And then the second thing is, you said I've got I'm at Google. I can see anything I want when it comes to the data. I've got all these tabs. I've got all my data. I've got a whole army behind me to interpret the data as needed. And, I can't help but say, listen, this is why Included exists, right? Because I'm thinking about the mid-sized businesses that don't have the engine, that don't have the army of analysts. I'm thinking about the small businesses. I'm thinking about the large enterprise businesses where the drive hasn't been there to stand up the team of DEI analysts, right? And they haven't provided the data, or the data, the leader over diversity or talent acquisition isn't totally sure which questions to ask, right? And that is the entire function of Included, is to democratize access to the DEI data, forecasting, predictions, and actions, because it's, look, we've got a mind like yours sitting over a data set like what Google has and an army of analysts, right? Like we need a line now and a data set like that and an army at every company. And we can do that now with software, which is, you and I both know, pretty huge breakthrough.
Agreed.
Yeah. Listen, so the question that I have for you here is, look, you've been in talent acquisition for a long time, and I'd say a hot spot for diversity recruiting is this question about time to fill. Recruiters are measured on time to fill. There's varying opinions about whether this is harmful or neutral when it comes to DEI recruiting. What's your take?
Time to fill is important. I would say that. I think there's this assumption made that it takes longer, and some of it is founded on some data. Yeah, I mean, there's less availability of talent within certain demographics, and they might be more difficult to find. But I think that if you start to prioritize it, and if you have the proper teams for it that's doing the work in advance, then you can have that pipeline there ready for you. Time to fill is important from a recruiting perspective, from a business perspective, right? People like to talk about it like, in order for a product to get out, in order for it to have the optimal chance of being successful, there needs to be a team that's going to be there to support it. because of this misconception that it's going to take dramatically longer, you're absolutely right. If you're just starting, you're absolutely right. It's going to take so much longer. If you're purely transactional as a recruiting organization, then it's going to take so much longer. But if you're not, and you do the work in advance and build towards that space where you have that talent pool to take a look at, it's really not. It might affect it a little bit, but it's not going to affect it to it's not going to be consequential, right? You're still going to get people in seat in time. I'm not one of those people that argues against it. I actually argue that, okay, well, how are you preparing for it? Now that you know this, I mean, if you have other data sets for a product and you know all these things, you're going to properly prepare for it. Why wouldn't you do that in representation? Why wouldn't you do that in diversity?
Do you think, well, so, I mean, the question, can you answer your own question? Like, what do you think is happening there?
What do you mean?
So they're not measuring, so a lot of folks, the way they're approaching this is they're releasing the time to fill requirement for diversity recruiting, right? They're saying it's
Right.
not possible, right? What do you make of that hopelessness?
That hopelessness comes from recruiting really being a transactional system. And when you're talking about, okay, so these are just facts, right? I mean, there are less folks that look like me that are available with certain skill sets.
Yeah.
It's just a fact. It's just a fact.
Yeah.
But if your recruiting process is just purely transactional, then yeah, you're going to be looking for who's right there, right then. One of my good friends, she explained it the best way possible, the best way that I had ever heard it. Right? She said, basically, she said, so let's just say you have a bag of Skittles, and majority of those Skittles are green, but you need a red one. But there's not that many red ones in there. You pour the bag out, you're still going to have to do a little bit more searching to get the red.
Mm.
But if your favorite is red, why don't you just take the red out and put them in a separate bag?
Mm.
Right? Because you're searching them out already. You're doing this in advance. You're not doing this per rec. You're doing it per the company and for the overall solution, and it's continuous. You're constantly looking. You're not just looking at time, which is transactional,
Mm.
right? Then you actually have something to pull from.
Mm.
So I would say that yes, I mean there are ways to do this. You just
Yeah.
I don't know that we've been doing it the right way. And I'm not talking about Google. I'm talking about like the industry as a whole.
Yeah.
There's certain truths that we just have not taken a really good look at.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's been interesting building technology on this conversation. As you know, our first of 5 modules to complete the wall-to-wall DEI insights and action steps for enterprise is our first module is for talent acquisition. And as we really are customer obsessed and really talking to folks like yourself, it's become more and more evident that one of the highest prized capabilities that we're able to do is deliver to recruiters the exact group of candidates who are historically underrepresented identities, who are yet to be screened in the pipeline, or who previously applied for a role and have a high skill match to the open, like to deliver those folks, right? And just when you say we're not doing it right, it implies a lot of different things. And where my mind goes is because we're so busy building the capability to solve a lot of these problems, operationalize, automate, make life a little more delightful, is how true that is and how much the customers are really asking for those kinds of assists, right? That kind of boost.
I'll give you another example. Like within organizations, some of the best recruiters are within their executive recruiting function. Executive recruiting is not transactional. Executive recruiting is purely consultative and partnerships, right? Like I reach out to Laura and I say, hey, I have this opportunity for you and I think it'd be great for you. You tell me, oh, no, it's not the right time. I say to you, all right, well, I'm going to stay in touch with you, right? And hopefully, we find something that's going to, pique your interest.
Yeah.
It's because it's a high priority need that happens,
Mm.
right? I would say the same thing about representation. It's a high priority need. So now you have to go out and build those relationships.
Mm.
We exist. People need to stop saying that we don't exist. We don't exist in the same numbers that our white counterparts do,
Yeah.
but we definitely exist. Your job, if you're going to be effective at this, is to come and find us, create relationships with us, and then create an environment that we want to go to, and then let us know when something is appropriate.
Yeah.
But if you're looking for me on the spot for a role and this is what you got, and then you're taking off and doing it all over again, that's just silly.
Yeah.
That takes too much time. That takes too much time.
Yeah, I know I can speak for our CEO Raghu, that when he took one look at this space as a software architect and sort of successful technology founder, he said there's so many steps. There's so many steps involved in doing it well. Surely there must be a technological solution. And so, I love what you said, we exist.
Mm-hmm.
One of the questions, Lionel, I know you said you don't like to look at the questions ahead of time, but one of the questions I wrote was just for you.
Okay.
Yeah. So I know that you have identified at some points as a nerd.
Slightly, yeah.
You enjoy things that are sort of roughly related to science fiction, innovation,
Yep.
futurism.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk about the importance of Black futurism, Black futures?
Ooh. Wow. That's a really complicated answer. I think it's extremely important, but I think that we also have to take a look at our past to be able to figure out where we're going in our future. I think oh God, I think where our society has opportunity to do better is in within those communities that have been so marginalized and actually accepting the fact that there was wrong done. I think that it's very difficult for certain communities to take a look at their existence and take a look at their futures and say, this is where we could be, because so much of it has been taken away from them. Oh, man, that's a really deep question. And I think it'd be a conversation for another time. I think that conversation would take an hour and a couple drinks.
I
Right.
You know how I feel about that. So let
Yeah.
me just come join you in the middle of that statement there and say that, there's some I've always really liked to track sort of emerging, high value conversations in what's now called the diversity, equity, and inclusion space that help us to think new
Mm-hmm.
thoughts, right? Because in order to break out of the legacy of institutional oppression against the neurodiverse, against disabled, veteran, Black communities, female, etc., non-binary, trans, LGBTQIA plus, we have to literally think new thoughts. And I mean, for me, that's a delight, opportunity, anytime. And Black futurism has been growing for a number of years now. I know one of the staff members that included, Chelsea Alvarez, is a huge Black futurist. And there's this beautiful, simple tagline: we exist in the future. And I love the threads that it pulls, right? So this idea of old-fashioned science fiction imagery, it's all white in the future, like the Jetsons. Yeah. Right. And this idea of the importance of visualizing something new.
We exist more in the future. 2045, right? It's like the majority is going to be like mixed folks and brown folks. That's what that's what they're saying, right?
Yep.
So we exist more in the future. I think
I love that.
one of the things that it's not just existing though, right? It's more about, what's going to be our position and where are we going to be in that future, and we do a really poor job of educating, I mean, in general, public public schools, and I can go into that a little bit deeper. But in general, we do a poor job there. But one of the areas that we really, really fail with people is actually allowing for them to see a future for themselves. We do a really good job through propaganda, et cetera, describing all these horrible aspects of human beings. But I think that we do a poor job is talking about, what we could be and who we could be, and I think that trickles down within certain communities in an even more devastating and damaging way.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, we will be there. We exist.
I love this. I love it. There's more of us in the future. That's like you just one-upped an entire movement. I love it, Lionel. Of course, this is why I asked you to come talk with me today. Wow, a big thank you to our guest expert today for sharing both personal and professional insights and strategies on what's working in DEI. Really great advice and tips today. And I think we've got a lot of meaningful food for thought and specific actions that we can all leverage in building out our DEI strategies in these coming quarters. If you would like additional insights, check out included.ai. Included is the complete DEI data platform. It's easy to use. You customize the platform with your business needs, and Included provides instant, actionable insights based on your own people data. Included integrates with your existing people systems like ATS and HRIS and provides data-based guidance so you can build, retain, and promote your winning teams easily, now driven by DEI data science with Included. You can subscribe to the DEI What's Working podcast on your favorite platforms, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and on our YouTube channel. Don't forget to leave us a rating and review so that our episodes can reach an even wider audience of practitioners. Thank you so much for tuning in.